So that's my kind of first theme, is that we need to allow children to be in that moment. And this whole thing about the gap that's come out today, and this obsession with they've got to catch up. It's like, what are they catching up with? Everybody's been in the same boat. So that's kind of one thing. And I think, I don't know if other parents have found this, but I have found it wonderful to be at home in the moment with my children, and to just kind of follow their lead and let them figure out what they want to learn. So that's been really lovely. So that's my first sort of theme. My second theme is a theme for when they actually go back to school, and I'm going to be talking to teachers a lot about this, because I think what we're in danger of doing is creating a deficit narrative. And again, you're hearing this today, aren't you, where they've got to catch up, and they won't have done this and they won't have done that, and they haven't done their schoolwork. And yet I sent out a tweet earlier saying, tell me something wonderful your children have done during lockdown. And it's amazing what people have been doing. So I think what schools are going to need to do, if they're not going to have a really difficult time with children, is say to them, tell us what you've been doing, and we'll try and build on that. So I think that's another message from me to teachers, particularly that one, I think, because it's very tempting to kind of feel this pressure to push on and get through curriculum and so on. And then my third theme, and I'll kind of finish up with this bit, is the idea of consent rather than compliance. So I think the system has kind of got bent out of shape almost, and we've created a system now where we've forgotten this about the children. So it should be about, you know, how do the children feel about things, and how are we going to work with the children? But at the moment, it feels like education is being done to children rather than done with them. And again, that's a theme I talk to teachers about a lot as well. And I think it's how we sort of link up the parents with the teacher, because I think teachers are really open to this. So most of the teachers I meet don't like the way the system is. I mean, you wouldn't know it, perhaps some of the headlines, but actually most of them are really uncomfortable with a system that doesn't match with the values of the families that they work with. So I think there's a real power in parents working together with teachers. And then last thing I'll say is there needs to not be a baseline. I'm sure Elaine will talk about this, so I won't steal her thunder, but it cannot happen that we test children who are not in compulsory education when they have been through the trauma of, or not trauma, maybe they've enjoyed it, but they've been through that experience. We cannot be going, first thing we need to do is test them. Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me along, Alistair. I hope that wasn't too waffly.
Unmute myself. Thank you very much, Sue. Okay, so our next speaker is Louise Regan from the National Education Union. Louise is also a primary school head teacher. And Louise, please unmute.
Okay, thanks so much for inviting me. I am a primary teacher at the moment, actually. So I'm back in the classroom, which is very good. So I'll just put that out there. But thanks for that, Sue. That was very interesting. And what was interesting about what you said was about what young people think. And my nearly 18-year-old daughter came in while I was listening to the ridiculous statement from the government tonight and said, and they were talking about catch up, and she said, oh, it's ridiculous. She said, to be fair, I think I've learnt more in the time since I left school than I learnt when I was at school. And that wasn't a criticism of her teachers or the people working with it. It was just that she was in a grad grind. She was in an academy that was just focused on exam results. And so, you know, what she said was, I've learnt lots more about life since I left school. So to imply that children and young people are learning nothing at home is an absolute outrage, actually. But anyway, that's a whole separate issue, and I must hurry on because you were very good on timing, and I'm going to try to be the same soon. So I'm not going to talk about sort of what has happened in the past with the union in terms of the pressure that we put on around school closures or, you know, shutdown of schools. Obviously, schools have been open throughout the period, but our sort of pressure there and our 5 key demands around safe returns. Because I think people probably are aware of that and can ask about those things. I sort of wanted to talk about where we're at, really. And what what I want to say is that I think as a union, we have really shone a light on how to work effectively, not only with our members, but with our communities and with our parents and those people that care about what is happening. And I think that that has been the strength of our campaign, is that what we have done has engaged people because they've recognised that we are on the side of children and young people and our members, whereas we've got a government that's in chaos and clearly has no commitment to keeping people safe. And the other thing I'll say before I go on to where we're at is that there's not one of our members who does not want children and young people back in schools as soon as possible, because we know that is where they want to be and need to be, but we only want that to happen when it is safe for them to be there, not only for them, but for our members and other people working in education, but also for the wider community, because what happens in schools goes back out into communities. You know, so if children pick things up in schools, they'll take it back out into their communities, and we don't want to put that risk in place, really. So we've done a really good and effective campaign, I think, right from the very start. We've been very vocal and outspoken. We've been very heavily criticised by the government, which probably indicates we're doing something right. You know, we have been very forceful in what we've said. We've had massive member engagement. We've had significant new members and interestingly, significant numbers of new workplace reps. And I think that's really important, because the place where we need to engage and build is in our workplaces, and those reps will stand us in good stead going forward in this, really, because we are where we are, but you know, there's going to be lots coming forwards, particularly if any of you watched the Education Secretary tonight and some of the things that they said, and I'm going to just mention a bit of that briefly. So at the end of last week, we announced our 10-point recovery plan. Now that is on the basis that we have a government that keeps saying we've got to do things, but doesn't give any guidance or say how that's going to happen. Literally, it appears to me, they make things up on the hoof, put out sound bites and expect that somebody somewhere else will deliver something. So we decided we should initiate a 10-point recovery plan. It covers a whole range of issues. I won't go through them all. I will put it in the chat for you. One of those points, interestingly, we've already won, because the government was saying they weren't going to give free school meals to children over the summer holidays, but thanks to some famous footballer, and I know nothing about football, but apparently he is very famous, along with pressure from lots of other people, obviously, we have now won that, and we are now going to provide those free school meals over the summer. It also talks a lot in our 10-point plan, I will say, about disadvantaged children and young people and their families. And I just want to make clear that disadvantage has been created by governments. You know, children are placed in poverty by governments, and it's really important that we call that out. You know, after this crisis, this government are going to try and make our families, our communities pay for what it has cost this government, and we have to keep calling them out about that. We have had too many years of austerity and children being placed and living in poverty, and the impact of that. And when I listened to the government talk tonight on the announcement about catch-up programs and what was happening and and I think it's disgraceful. These people are the people who have let our children down, not us. So I will share the 10-point plan in the chat, because I just haven't got time to go through it all. It is very comprehensive, but I would say, because people have asked about this, each of those points we will expand and put out more detail about what our expectation is. And we launched one part of that this week, which is around summer learning, which talks about the 5 C's, which are linked to caring, context for learning, creative curriculum, building and celebrating our communities, and connecting with what is happening in schools. I'll just end with this, really. I think one of the other things that has come out during this crisis, with the killing of George Floyd in America, and then the toppling of the Edward Colston statue, is that there is a real an increasing awareness of racism, you know, systemic and racism within our society. We had a decolonising education conference back in December, actually, way before all this happened. and we have had a big build around that. But our members are very keen, I think, to look at the curriculum en masse, really. And if you listen to what the government, they were questioned about it tonight, actually. Their response was actually shameful. It was absolutely disgraceful, really. What the education minister said was that there were lots to celebrate, you know, and sort of belittling, really, of what our government had done. And actually, in some ways, was trying to put the blame on educators, that it was our fault that we weren't teaching them these things, you know. And I think we have to really use this crisis as an opportunity to completely transform our education system. We have a real opportunity here to get rid of some of the rubbish and to create a truly transformed curriculum. And there is lots of really good practice out there that we can build on. This isn't something new. There are lots of people doing very good things in isolation, but we have had a government that has created a very grad grind curriculum, very exam focused, content focused curriculum, which is dull and boring. And actually we have a real opportunity to change this for our children, our young people and our communities. And I think this is a real opportunity for us going forward. And I will stop there because I've talked for too long. I apologise. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Louise. And I think the NEU's 10-point programme has been central to our thinking about why we wanted to get parents together. Obviously, that's for staff, but many of the issues that the staff are raising are the issues that parents have. And I think Louise is absolutely right. The issue of racism in education, which has been shone, such a bright light has been shone by the events in America and also here, is why we wanted to make sure that that was properly represented in a meeting. Black parents across the country are hugely frustrated, have been for many years, about the nature of our curriculum, what in my school we described in our planning meeting this week as the male pale stale curriculum. And we are really clear that any parents movement has to be at the forefront, has to be the voices of black parents, black and ethnic minority parents. So I'm really delighted, I hope she's still on the call somewhere, to introduce Salma Yaqub,